Bill Gates is one of the first really famous billionaires. Everyone really knew all about him. There's been other famous wealthy people, or wealthy or famous because they're wealthy, like the Rockefellers. But Bill Gates has just kind of been this enigma all throughout my life, the Microsoft founder. And some people really love this guy. It seems increasingly more and more people kind of hate this guy. And he's been catching a lot of flack, especially for his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Jeffrey Epstein, I'm sure you know by this point, but he is a center of controversy. He has been the center of a conspiracy theory. I mean, I was hearing about this conspiracy theory as a kid, that there are all these politicians flying over to this island and sleeping with, minors and stuff like that. Jeffrey Epstein was known as kind of this serial pedophile. And like most conspiracy theories, there was the majority of people who were like, come on, man. Like, really? There's a plane that all these famous people get on, all these politicians get on, and they fly to some private island where they, have sex with minors. Like, come on, really? Like, get a life. That's not happening. It turns out that was happening, right? Like, Jeffrey Epstein was actually found guilty of, indecency with minors, some kind of charge quite a few years ago. And then obviously he was put into prison, and then he killed himself. So, we don't really know. It's like everyone's mad that there's this conspiracy that he didn't kill himself. But you have to at least be understanding that his whole life was a conspiracy theory that ended up basically being true. And what a lot of people have believed about the specifics of how Jeffrey Epstein operated, because it's very hard to understand where all of this money came from or what he even did for a living, is that he would just blackmail these people. He would get something on these celebrities, on these politicians, and maybe even he would create the blackmail and then he would hold it over their head and he'd leverage it for money and influence and power. And Bill Gates meeting with Jeffrey Epstein was a big deal because he was meeting with him even after he had already been convicted the first time, like actually found guilty, and really got off almost scot-free, which unfortunately in what seems to be a two-tier justice system that often happens with people who are wealthy or famous. And so Bill Gates continuing to meet with him had definitely raised some red flags, and people wondered maybe he's compromised as well, because why else would this billionaire who's all over the place and all over the news and is trying to, do all these things to supposedly end world hunger and stuff, why is he still like being seen with this guy and being in public with this guy? And it has come out now. It is all over the news that allegedly Bill Gates was being blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein, and we actually know the details of that blackmail now. And that really shines a terrible light on Bill Gates, because he's been all over the news. He's been asked about this so many times, and he always denies it. There was a really interesting clip just briefly after Jeffrey Epstein died, and they were asking about Bill Gates' relationship with him, and he said, "Look, it was just about, fundraising. We were never friends. I thought that he could help me raise money." Well, it turns out all of that is actually a lie, that Bill Gates had an affair with a bridge player overseas. Jeffrey Epstein found out about it because apparently that's what he was good at, is getting dirt on people, and then leveraged it against Bill Gates. Now, to be fair to the situation, it appears that Bill Gates didn't, at least from the investigation at this point, didn't give into the blackmail in terms of he didn't give him $1 billion. It doesn't really appear like he gave him a whole lot of money, if any at all. But at minimum, the blackmail did keep their relationship together. And it appears that Bill Gates would continue having these meetings with him from time to time to pacify him in order for this story about his affair to not come out. And in one of these interviews, I mean, just kind of the creepiest thing, this went all over the internet. Bill is asked about kind of what lessons could be learned from Jeffrey Epstein's death. And here's that video.
Is there a lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
Well, he's dead. So, in general, you always have to be careful. I'm very proud of what we've done in philanthropy, very proud of the work of the foundation.
Well, he's dead. So you just have to be careful, says Bill Gates. Now, Bill is awkward. He's socially awkward, doesn't have the best social skills. So if we give him the benefit of the doubt, we can just say this was like a really, really inappropriately socially awkward moment. If you're just listening and not watching on YouTube, which, by the way, subscribe on YouTube, he says, well, he's dead. And so you should be careful as he smiles, right? Hey, don't do that. You know, that's wild. Especially now that we have the context that Bill Gates was being blackmailed by this guy. And so, yeah, like Jeffrey Epstein no longer breathing is kind of to his benefit. I'm not saying there's any connection there at all. It's just like, man, for years now, this guy has been holding this thing over your head. Now he's no longer. So the answer, he's dead. So I guess you should just be careful, is a very, very strange answer indeed. So how do we think about this? And before we're too harsh on Bill Gates, which is very easy to do, what does that look like to get blackmailed? And this is something that is actually happening to people more often these days, as more and more of our lives are being put out for everyone to see on social media. More and more people are coming under, blackmail, being extorted. I've had quite a few friends whose kids have come under some version of this, where bad actors online will either pull something out of a conversation, or they will kind of groom them to send them a slightly inappropriate picture. And once they have it, then they will start saying, I need $100. If you don't send me $100, I'm going to show your parents this. I need $500. If you don't send me $500, I'm going to send this to everyone on your friends list. This is happening all of the time, especially in our culture of sexting. This is even happening to adults, where someone gets tricked into sending a nude picture to someone that they've never met before on Snapchat or wherever else. And all of a sudden they have you, and they will extort you, and they will blackmail you, and they will hold this thing over your head. And so the blackmail part of it is obviously just atrocious. The fact that this is apparently how Jeffrey Epstein operated and moved about the world, and this is how he chose to, spend his life. There's all kinds of ideas that he was some kind of operative for some spy organization. I don't know. What I know is it seems like he was an expert at extorting people. And that's a terrible way to live, and it's a terrible thing to do to people. In the book of Wisdoms, Proverbs 11, it says, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Blackmail is duplicity. Extortion is duplicity. And Jeffrey Epstein eventually was destroyed by his duplicity. And it's the integrity of the upright that guides their life. It's the integrity that keeps them on a higher plane. It's their integrity that allows them to move about the world without having to blackmail or extort. And we have to be really careful about this, because it's easy to point at Jeffrey Epstein, someone who's literally going out of their way to dig up dirt or put people in compromising positions. But we use emotional blackmail a lot, especially when we're living as victims in our life. And, what's really sad is we normally do this to the people that we love the most, our spouses, maybe even our children. As children, we try to do this to our parents. Emotional blackmail is when you know someone better than anyone else knows them. And so you leverage the parts of their life, or the parts of their story, or the things that hurt them the most, in order to get your way, or in order to make them feel bad, or in order to guilt trip them. And so we can extort as well. And maybe that seems like it's on a much smaller level. The fact that you bring up a difficult part of someone's past in order to try and get your way in a situation. When you say, you always do this, you've always been this way, you're acting just like your dad, you're behaving the same way you did in your last marriage, or all of those things are emotional blackmail. It's hard because life is hard, and it's hard to get your way. And so we're always looking for leverage points, but oftentimes those leverage points can dovetail into extortion or blackmail. And the duplicitous, those who use those kinds of means, are ultimately destroyed by it. And so make sure you inventory your own life. I've got to inventory my own life and make sure that I'm not using these minor forms of blackmail, because it's not Jeffrey Epstein, and we're not controlling all of the celebrities, actors, and politicians in the world with our extortion. But we can be hurting people, and it is a lack of integrity. And so blackmail is obviously terrible. You should make sure that you're not doing it, even at this microscopic level. But what about Bill Gates in his position? How do we avoid putting ourselves in position to be blackmailed? And if we do end up in a situation like this, because we are all sinners in need of grace, and we all screw up, man. And so what if someone does find something against us and leverages it against us? How should we act? In Psalms, this beautiful book of poetry, chapter 25, it says, guard my life and rescue me. Do not let me be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness protect me. May integrity and uprightness protect me. It's interesting because when we think of ideas like integrity, these virtues in our life, when we think of living an upright life, something where all of our deeds are done in the light, everyone knows what's going on, everyone can trust us. When we think of that, we don't usually think of that as protection. But in the Psalm, it says, may integrity and uprightness protect me. That these things are actually like shields. And what are they shields against? Well, they're shields against things exactly like this, exactly like blackmail, exactly like extortion, exactly like someone trying to use your actions or your transgressions as a point of leverage in order to begin directing your life or making you say things you don't want to say or do things that you don't want to do. I mean, it's kind of simple, but if you live an upright life and a life that is full of integrity, then there's nothing for anyone to blackmail you with. And man, it's like we should be living with the end in mind. If you are a faith-based person, a spiritual person, if you're a Christian, you should be living to honor your God and to walk in his ways. But honoring God and obeying God, it always has incredibly practical benefits for us as well. Something I say a lot in my role at MetaChurch as the pastor there is the deepest spiritual things are also the most deepest practical things. They're deeply practical. They just play out in your life. And so you live a life of integrity, then there's nothing for anyone to leverage against you. There's a great scriptural injunction for our lives. It shows up in a lot of places. Here in the book of Philippians, it says, you will prove yourselves to be blameless and innocent, children of God above reproach in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. This term, above reproach, it's the picture of someone leveraging an accusation against you. And everyone who knows you or even knows about you or has heard anything about your reputation, as soon as that accusation is leveraged, above reproach is the picture of everyone going, there's no way. Like a lot of people would do that, but she would not do that. Like, I know that's common in this crooked and perverse generation, but you're going to have to bring the receipts because there's no way. That's a life of integrity. That's a life that is above reproach. Above reproach means you can handle false accusations because your character is so impeccable that it's going to take like a full trial for people to actually believe you did it. You truly will be innocent until proven guilty, not just in the eyes of the law, but in the eyes of your peers, because your reputation and your past, it speaks for itself. And if you are living above reproach, which is not a PR stunt, it's not something that you sculpt around yourself. Above reproach is actual and factual. It's how you are living. It's the way you're navigating your life. It's keeping your deeds out in the light for all to see and making sure that nothing is hidden. When you live above reproach, you can't be blackmailed. You can't be extorted. The Greek philosopher Epictetus, which I didn't know a lot about. Apparently, he was actually born into slavery. He was finally like abandoned somewhere else and just over time became this incredible philosopher. He says, no man is free who is not a master of himself. And again, that's significant because he was born into slavery. He knows what it means to actually not have your freedom and still have the freedom of mastering yourself. No man is free who is not a master of himself. And Jesus said, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is the slave of sin. And that is a spiritual truth that you will become enslaved to your sin. The more you sin, the more you lose your volition. The more you lose your volition, the more your addiction takes over. The more your addiction takes over, the more you let go of your will. The more you let go of your will, the more you're just like an animal operating off instinct. You will actually become enslaved to your sins. You'll become enslaved to your addictions. You'll become enslaved to pornography. You'll become enslaved to lying. And all of a sudden, you know, in your pride or your lust or your overspending, the way that you manage your money, if you sinfully manage your money, then you won't own your money will own you. You won't own your words will own you. You won't own your relationships will own you. Everyone who commits sin is a slave of sin. And the more you sin, the more you become enslaved. And so what do we do? Because we're all screwed up and we've all done things that if everyone knew about them, man, we would not know what to do with ourselves. And maybe there are text messages on your phone right now that if they were made public, you wouldn't know how to go on living. Maybe there are, sites that you consistently visit, relationships that you're in, ways that you're spending your money, or ways that you're gaining other people's money. There are relationships that happen that, man, if they came to light, just like Bill Gates, he had this affair and he did not want Melinda to find out about it. Seems to be the story between him and Jeffrey Epstein. So what do we do? How do we live with integrity when we have screwed up, when we've given people opportunity to use something against us? And the answer is obvious, but the answer is painful. And most people won't do it. And even multi-billionaires like Bill Gates struggle to do it. And they just continue to lie and dig themselves a hole. The answer is you become a master of yourself. You take back your freedom by bringing what's in the dark into the light. And I love this verse in James. James was the half brother of Jesus. He wrote one of the books of the New Testament. He says in James 5:16, therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another. And it's so interesting what he connects to this. It doesn't say so you'll be forgiven. It doesn't say so you'll get to go to heaven someday. He says confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed. And I believe this. I actually believe this on a physical level. I believe this when it comes to our mental health. And I think this is the prescription for if there is something that someone is leveraging against you, some hidden sin, some hidden offense. As hard as it will be to come public with that, to confess that, that is the answer to actually being healed, to being restored is another way to interpret that, to be made whole, to be saved. Come forward with it. And the things that are hidden in your life, they kill you. They kill your relationships. They kill your mental health, and they actually kill you. A lot of what we diagnose as anxiety are things that we're hiding in our life. Now, there is real clinical anxiety, and I don't pretend to understand all of that. But a lot of people who deal with everyday anxiety, it's because something's hidden. And a lot of it is hidden in their iPhones, in their pockets, and they're carrying their anxiety around with them. And the anxiety is, what if this was found out? And the answer is, if one person found out, they could put a chain around your life and jerk you around wherever they wanted you to go. They could extort you. They could blackmail you. If the people that you love found out, it would damage your relationships. If your work found out, you might lose your job. And so confess your sins. You become the master of yourself. You get ahead of it. You bring it into the light. And by doing that, you will have to face the music, and it will be very difficult, but you will take back the God-given authority that you have to actually be in some level of control of your own actions and your own life. And now is the time to do it. And the longer you wait, the harder it will get. So live above reproach and live a life of integrity. And a life of integrity doesn't mean you never mess up, but it does mean when you mess up, you take the ownership, you come forward, you confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed.